A narration tells us about King Jaehaerys, the ruler of the Targaryen clan, who has 10 dragons under his command. After a series of unfortunate incidents, both his sons pass away and he is left with no direct heir, so he summons a council to help him with his succession. A lot of claims follow, but only 2 of them are considered, Princess Rhaenys and Prince Viserys. Due to Rhaenys being a woman, the council members decide to crown Viserys as the new ruler. 9 years into his reign, Viserys still doesn't have a male heir to the throne. We then witness a giant dragon flying over King's Landing and swooping down in front of some very concerned soldiers, led by Sir Harold Westerling. That's when we see Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen climbing down the dragon, completely unharmed, and it makes everyone breathe a sigh of relief. She meets her friend Alicent Hightower and visits the king's castle, where she greets her pregnant mother, Aemma. Rhaenyra wishes to become a knight and fight for her kingdom, but is told that her primary task is to bear a child and further the Targaryen bloodline. Meanwhile, Viserys and his council discuss a new villain named Kragus Dreher, who is also known as the Crab Feeder due to his barbarous torture techniques. Lord Corlys Velaryon voices his concern over this enemy being part of the Triarchy, an alliance of the Free Cities plotting to invade King's Landing and destroy their shipping lanes. Rhaenyra comes in and serves as the king's cupbearer in order to overhear the discussion. Her father seems to be certain that Aemma is going to bless him with a baby boy, but this upsets Rhaenyra, so she leaves the scene. She meets her uncle Daemon, who is coveting the Iron Throne as he wishes to be king one day. They talk about his ambitions and then he gives her a necklace made of Valyrian steel. Now Rhaenyra and Alicent have a small argument, but we also learn that the king has been infected with a strange disease that seems to have been caused due to his regular contact with the Iron Throne. Viserys goes to see Aemma and talks to her about the upcoming birth of their baby. However, she's in visible pain and tells her husband that this is the last time she's going to bear a child for him, as she has already lost too many children. Later in the night, Daemon motivates the men of the City Watch and leads them on a mission to punish some of the wrongdoers of King's Landing. An intense encounter follows as the troops and their commander dominate the defenseless townsfolk, showing no mercy. Daemon's actions draw criticism from the other members of the council, so they summon him the next day. He's advised not to be so extreme with the City Watch, but it simply leads to an argument between Daemon and the king's hand, Otto Hightower. Things only get worse when Daemon insults his own wife and mocks Otto for wanting her. Viserys calms the situation, after which Daemon leaves as he's bored. The next day, the king kicks off a celebration to commemorate Aemma going into labor, and then we see some knights engaging in a fierce duel. The audience enjoys the deadly performances of these soldiers, while Rhaenyra asks Harold about the fighting techniques being used. Now Daemon arrives and challenges Otto's son to a duel. He uses dirty tactics to win his battle, and then he flirts with Alicent for a bit. As the duels carry on in ugly fashion, Aemma struggles to give birth to her child and Viserys tries to offer support. Unfortunately, he has to make a choice between Aemma and the child, as the birthing process is not happening smoothly. Meanwhile, Daemon shows off his fighting skills with excessive pride, while Rhaenyra and the others watch his behavior with shock. He is eventually challenged and defeated by a Dornish knight named Criston Cole, but refuses to yield and challenges him to a contest of arms. Here he gains the advantage for a bit, but is beaten at the very end when he gets too confident. Daemon is forced to yield, but remains disrespectful towards his opponent. In the middle of this, Aemma is forced to give birth via surgery, even though it is completely against her wishes. The struggling queen ends up dying, but Viserys seems to prefer the fact that he's finally been given a baby boy. The child is named Balon, but unfortunately he also passes away within a few hours. Later at the funeral, Rhaenyra laments her selfish father, but Daemon tells her to offer support during a difficult time. After that, the princess summons a dragon to burn her mother's and brother's corpses with its dragon breath. Now the council gets together to discuss the king's successor, but there is no unanimous opinion. Daemon and Rhaenyra are chosen as possible candidates, but the arguments get ugly and Viserys angrily shuts them down as he doesn't want to choose between his daughter and his brother. The troubled king starts to crumble under pressure, but then Otto sneakily sends Alicent to visit and seduce him under the guise of comfort. Meanwhile, Daemon sulks as he had overheard the council's discussion regarding his claim to the throne. He gets drunk at a pleasure house and announces that Balon was merely the heir for a day. This is reported to Viserys and he gets very upset, so he summons his brother immediately. Daemon is berated for making such an arrogant and insensitive statement, but he remains cold and unconcerned. Instead, he counters by saying he can protect Viserys from his own folly, but this only leads to an ugly conversation that results in Daemon being sent away from King's Landing. Now, Viserys finally comes to his senses and meets Rhaenyra in the family dungeon. He talks to her about the epic dragon that started it all and eventually appoints her as his official heiress. He also cautions his daughter against the Great Winter, but she accepts her new role instantly. Now we see her appointment ceremony where everyone pledges their loyalty to her. 6 months have passed and we learn that Daemon has illegally seized Dragonstone. Even the crab feeder begins to attack the stepstones, and this annoys Lord Collis, so he demands for some kind of action. Rhaenyra offers a feasible solution in attacking the enemy, but she's shut down by the others and is asked to be escorted by Sir Harold so that she can choose her new Knight's Guard. Rhaenyra is taken to a selection of soldiers, but she's not impressed with what she sees. She asks for a man with actual combat experience, so Criston is brought in front of her. The princess immediately accepts him, despite Otto's efforts to convince her otherwise. Meanwhile, Viserys talks to Alicent about his daughter and mentions that she might misunderstand his intentions. Alicent tries to gain his favor by cheering up Rhaenyra later on, but she remains adamant regarding her father's intentions. They pray next to some candles in order to connect with their mother's spirit, and it causes Rhaenyra to break down into tears. The girls talk about how unfairly they are treated by the men of the kingdom, and Rhaenyra vows to make a change. The next day, Collis and his wife Rhaenys warn Viserys of an upcoming war, as the kingdom is delicately poised without a male heir. In an effort to unite their houses, the couple suggests taking a new wife in Lady Laena, as it's been half a year since Aemma passed away. That night, Viserys has dinner with Rhaenyra and they try to have a personal conversation regarding his marriage. After that, we notice that the king's skin condition has grown even worse, so the council decides to use maggots as a means to cure his illness. Viserys mentions marrying Lady Laena to unite the strength of their houses, but this is met with some hesitation by Otto. The next day, Lady Laena and Viserys have an awkward conversation regarding their possible union, as she's shown to be only 12 years old. In the middle of this, Rhaenyra talks to Rhaenys about the political state of King's Landing, but is told that she will be abandoned the moment Viserys gets a baby boy from his new wife. Later, Viserys talks to Alicent about the pressure on him to remarry, and she tries to win his favor with a dragon sculpture. They are interrupted by Otto, who has called an emergency meeting to discuss a new situation. Here we learn that Daemon has decided to take a second wife under Valyrian tradition and has also stolen a dragon egg in order to provoke Viserys. The king wants to handle the situation directly, but Otto asks to go in his stead. He ends up meeting Daemon at Dragonstone and orders him to return the egg. Daemon simply taunts his opponent and it leads to a confrontation, but then his red dragon appears to intimidate the soldiers. Luckily, Rhaenyra shows up at that very moment, riding her own dragon, Syrax. She ignores Otto's instructions and confronts Daemon directly regarding his supposed marriage to his mistress Massaria. She taunts his strategies and dares him to kill her so that he can become the sole heir to the Iron Throne. But he refuses to do so and leaves after handing over the dragon egg to Otto. Later, Daemon is rebuked by his fiancée for using her as a pawn to provoke his brother. Now Viserys considers his options for marriage in consultation with Lord Strong, but is then informed of Rhaenyra's return from Dragonstone and he gets angry. The king rebukes his daughter for her rash behavior but calms down after she tells him that she was the one who managed to settle the dispute with Daemon. Rhaenyra seems to understand her father's need to remarry and expresses her approval. However, she's in for a shock later on when Viserys decides to take Alicent as his new wife. Corlys is visibly upset to hear this and storms off angrily, as does Rhaenyra, who feels betrayed by the only friend she had. After this, we see Corlys conspiring with Daemon to overthrow their king. Corlys proposes an alliance to take down Viserys, and then they discuss a possible solution to the crab feeder. 3 years pass by, but Daemon and Corlys continue to struggle against the crab feeder as the crown refuses to offer any support to their troops. We see one such incident where the villain uses his crabs to torture Daemon's men, and then the commander arrives with his vicious red dragon to dominate the enemy. He openly challenges Kragus to face him instead of hiding in the caves, but he is immediately attacked by a barrage of flaming arrows and is forced to retreat. Now we learn that Alicent has finally given Viserys a baby boy named Aegon, and the king happily celebrates his son's second birthday. However, he continues to ignore the battle situation at the Stepstones, which is only growing worse. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra is seen all by herself as she has begun to resent her father for neglecting her in favor of his new baby boy. Alicent, who is now pregnant with another child, tries to console her friend, but it seems that their relationship has also gone sour. Rhaenyra and Viserys have a brief argument regarding her marriage while they are on their way to yet another celebration. The princess clearly doesn't seem to fit in with the others and decides to be by herself rather than waste her time with the other women. Later, she meets Jason Lannister, who tries to woo her as his new bride. His attempts at flirting only angers Rhaenyra, and she confronts her father about it. The king tries to explain the importance of an alliance, but the princess remains arrogant that she doesn't want to be a wife. Otto interrupts them to mention the situation at the Stepstones, and Rhaenyra makes use of this diversion to make her escape on a horse. She's chased by Criston, who manages to keep her calm for now. Meanwhile, Viserys has a lot on his plate as he needs to make a decision on the Stepstone situation, but is interrupted when Jason tries to convince him to arrange for the wedding. However, the cunning knight messes up in the middle of his speech, and it upsets the king, who shoos him away. Viserys continues to drink, and then Otto comes up with the absurd idea to wed Aegon and Rhaenyra. This only makes things worse for him, so he asks Lord Strong for advice. He suggests marrying Rhaenyra to Lord Laenor, as he's the son of Corlys, and it will help to reunite the two houses again. Rhaenyra and Criston sit by the fireside and discuss whether the people of King's Landing would ever accept her as their queen. Suddenly, they are attacked by a wild boar, but the princess manages to kill it after a brief struggle. Now we see Viserys, who goes into a drunken rant in front of Alicent regarding the mistake he made by naming Rhaenyra as his heir. We can see how troubled he is when he struggles to kill a deer the next day in front of his subjects. In a parallel display, Rhaenyra prevents Criston from killing a deer. Later at night, Otto meets his daughter and commends her for giving birth to Aegon. However, she feels remorse about what this might do to Rhaenyra's chances as the future queen. Otto asks Alicent to maintain her focus as he wants her to push Viserys into naming Aegon as his heir. Later it is revealed that Daemon has asked his brother for aid, and it puts the king in a tricky situation. The next day, Rhaenyra gets into yet another argument with her father, but he manages to calm her down when he says that she can marry whichever man she wants. Now we see Daemon, Corlys and his men trying to come up with a counter-plan to the crab feeder as they keep retreating from his dragon's flames. Suddenly, Daemon receives a letter from Viserys, who has agreed to offer him aid. This prompts him to knock down the messenger, and then he heads to the crab feeder to offer peace. He seemingly surrenders his sword to the opponent, but this was simply a trick to draw them out of hiding. Then Daemon takes on an entire army of soldiers all by himself, but is struck by some arrows after an admirable fight. He struggles and all hope seems lost, but then Laenor arrives with his dragon to scorch everyone on the battlefield. Corlys and his men join in on the fun and finally defeat the army, while Daemon also takes down the crab feeder with ease. And that's the end of part 1. Like, share and subscribe if you want to see part 2 as well. And tap the bell icon for regular notifications too. See you later.